We've been seeing politicians defect.
Benue State Governor announces defection to the People's Democratic Party.
Two of our governor's colleagues left our party.
They move from one party, they dump one party, defect to another party.
Ebonyi State Governor, Chief Dave Amahi, has deserted the People's Democratic Party.
Zamfara State Governor Bello Matawale has officially defected.
Fani Coyote, he was led by the Spirit of God to join the APC to help in unifying the country.
You see a group of persons coming together, just jostling for power, wanting to take over government at all costs.
Okay.
From Triple E Media, I'm Rahmat Muhammad, and this is The Backstory. Everyone wants to win. And when we're on a losing team, it's only natural that we would want to change teams. Now, for finite games like soccer, basketball, volleyball, and others, it's acceptable when players move from one team to another. The fans may get upset, and they might even feel a little bit betrayed when a favorite player moves from one team to another. But they get over it. They get on with their day jobs, and they find a different team to cheer for. In the big picture, a soccer game is just a game. But what happens when it's our politicians who are moving so freely and easily from one political party to another?
Crossing the floor, carpet crossing,
Party switching, floor crossing,
party hopping, canoe jumping,
decamping, party defection. Political party defections are not new. In Nigeria, they've been happening since 1951.
The first documented incident of political party defections happened in Nigeria's western region. In 1951, Chief Obafemi Awolowo managed to convince about 20 members of the Western House of Assembly to defect from the NCNC party and move over to the AG.
The NCNC party, that's the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons, was led by Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, and they had just won the majority in the Eastern House of Assembly. So in order to deny NCNC the majority that they needed to also sweep the Western House of Assembly, the Action Group, AG, was formed in 1951. But the AG had a problem.
At the time, Nnamdi Azikiwe was a pretty popular and charismatic leader, so the NCNC actually had a decent chance of winning in the Western region. In order to convince NCNC members to defect, Action Group had to create a justification. They launched a campaign against Azikiwe and the NCNC on the basis of tribal sentiments.
Action Group argued that the Western region should be for Westerners and that the NCNC and particularly Azikiwe had an agenda of Igbo domination. And just like that, Action Group was able to sway public opinion away from Azikiwe and the NCNC, and this gave the defectors the social cover that they needed to cross the carpet over to the Action Group.
This effectively denied NCNC victory in the Western region, and AG went on to win the majority and formed the regional government.
Now, after this happened, a light bulb went off in every politician's head. They realized that political parties are a means of getting power. What they were going to do with that power was an afterthought. And the most important thing for them was to just secure the power.
But you already know this. You know that our politicians are in this game for power. And honestly, it's because we encourage them.
Whether we are Hausa, Igbo, Yorubas, Thieves, whatever we are, we want our man or woman, but mostly man, to be in power.
It doesn't matter what he's going to do with that power, what his plans are, or even what he did in the past. As long as our man has a chance to be in power, we don't care.
And if that means that our man has to switch political parties to get and stay in power, then so be it. Fast forward over 70 years since the first political defections. Over that time, we've had at least 140 political defections. Governors have defected, House of Rep members, senators, and even a vice president changed political parties while in power. So nothing has really changed except maybe one thing.
yes, we still want to see our own ethnic or religious man in power, but nowadays we actually want to see him do something for us. And if he's successful at doing something, maybe he's building roads, creating jobs, if he's doing something for us, then we want him to stay in government. And if his best chance of staying in government is by jumping to another party, then so be it. He has our blessings.
Now, every time this issue of political defection trends in the news, and it usually trends around election time, there are the political analysts who say that our political parties do not have ideologies, and that's why politicians can go around crossing the carpet. Then you have the legal analysts who point out that our Constitution does not really prohibit party defections.
And both groups of analysts are right. Our political parties don't really have clear ideologies, and the Constitution doesn't really prohibit defections. It tries to, but it's really a half-hearted attempt. So really the questions are, do we want our political parties to have clear ideologies, and do we want strict laws that prohibit party defections?
Let's start with our laws. Even though political party defections started to happen as early as 1951, our Constitution did not address the issue until 1979 during the Second Republic. At that time, the focus was to stop defections which were rampant in the legislature.
According to the 1979 Constitution, members of the National Assembly and State House of Assembly have to vacate their seat if they switch to another party while the House is in session. Seems pretty clear and simple, right? You change parties, you lose your seat.
But then the same Constitution goes on to say that if the elected official wants to switch parties because there's a division in their existing party or some kind of merger with other parties, then it's okay for them to switch and they don't have to vacate their seat.
So basically, the Constitution is saying you can't switch parties, but if you have to, then fine, go. And by the way, the prohibition is just for the legislative body. When it comes to the executive body, that's the presidency and governors, the Constitution is completely silent, doesn't even address them.
Now, our best guess about why the drafters of the 1979 Constitution did not add party defection prohibition for the executive is because party switching honestly wasn't an issue at the executive level at that time. Governors weren't really a big deal until after 1999, and why would a president or vice president switch parties?
So the soft prohibition against party defection that was added in 1979 continued through the 1999 Constitution, and it's what we're operating under today. According to sections 68 and 109 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, a senator, a House of Reps member, or a House of Assembly member will have to leave their seat if they defect from the political party that sponsored their election before the tenure expires. But if there is a division in their political party or a merger, then it's okay.
Now, the courts have really just sort of kept calm and allowed the circus to carry on. Until recently.
Federal High Court in Abuja has ordered the governor of Ebonyi State, David Umahi, and his deputy, Eric Kelechi Igwe, to immediately vacate their offices for unlawfully defecting from the People's Democratic Party.
In the past 2 years, we have had 2 high-profile cases of governors defecting from PDP to APC, Governor Bello Matawalle of Zamfara State and Governor David Umahi of Ebonyi State. In Governor Umahi's case, the Federal High Court has ordered him to vacate his seat, while in Governor Matawale's case, the court allowed him to keep his seat as governor.
Despite these contradictory court rulings, it would seem like we are approaching a tipping point on this issue of defections at the executive level. The fact that the courts are engaging on the issue may be a sign that they are ready to do something about it. So this might be a good time for we, the people, to really start giving this issue some thought. What do we want to see happen? Do we want to pass laws that completely stop politicians from defecting to another party during their tenure in office?
We can tell you that other countries similar to our own have passed laws intended to prohibit or regulate party switching, and those laws don't really work. Let's look at the case of India. Between 1957 to 1967, nearly 100 legislative members in India defected from the Congress Party and over 400 defected to the Congress Party. From 1967 to 1968, in 1 year only, there were over 300 party defections.
The story of one particular defector stands out. An independent candidate by the name of Gayalal had won the Harnaya Assembly elections in the morning. By afternoon, he joined the Congress Party. In the evening, he left the Congress Party. So the story goes that within 9 hours, this politician had effectively switched parties twice. He then waited a respectable 2 weeks before joining the United Front.
India eventually passed a series of anti-defection laws starting in 1973. The current anti-defection law punishes members of the Legislative Assembly by causing them to lose their seats if they defect or if they even vote against their party. And once they are declared a defector, they cannot become a minister in a government for 6 months. But in spite of these punitive measures, the National Election Watch and Association for Democratic Reforms reports that there have been over 400 political party defections in India between 2016 and 2020.
Clearly, the legislators have found ways to work around the law. Now, analysts in India have pointed out that part of the issue is that the law does not punish political parties for encouraging or accepting the defecting legislatures. But perhaps a more fundamental reason why the law is not effective is because it is not consistent with the realities of political life in India.
So, taking a lesson from India, which is very similar to Nigeria in so many ways, it may not make sense for us to add more laws to try to stop political defections. The laws simply won't work because anti-defection laws would be inconsistent with the realities of our political life. So instead, let's turn to the other reason that people usually give for why defection is so high amongst our political parties.
We doubt if political parties in Nigeria actually have ideas, if they believe in ideology. This come to play.
The implication here is that if we have political parties that have ideologies which are separate and distinct from one another, then if an elected official aligns with a party based on that ideology, it would be hard for him to then justify crossing over to a party of the opposite ideology.
Now, the people who make this argument usually have the political parties of the United States in mind. The Democrats and the Republicans, they both want the United States to thrive, but they have very different ideas about what a thriving country looks like and the ways to achieve that end.
And it is difficult to find cases of defection across these two parties today. Since the mid-1800s, there have been less than 40 political party defections at the federal level in the United States. In the US, there are no laws that prohibit defection. Rather, the political ideologies of the parties and the voter expectations are enough to checkmate the practice.
But what analysts often forget is that the ideologies of the Democrats and Republicans developed and evolved over a long period of time. It wasn't like they woke up one day, hired McKinsey for a workshop, and then wrote up their ideology in a nice PowerPoint slide. The political ideologies of Democrats and Republicans developed over centuries of social and economic pressures.
So yes, clear and distinct political ideologies would help curb the practice of carpet crossing. Then the question is, what is it going to take for our political parties to align with separate and distinct ideologies?
An ideology is essentially the way in which you see the world and your belief about the way that the world should be. A political ideology just means that you are taking those beliefs and you're using them to drive public policies that would eventually shape the world into what you want it to be. We all have some form of ideology, but for the most part, they remain personal to us and our small circle of family and friends.
But when those ideologies come under negative pressure, that's when they can turn into political ideologies which have the power to shape our society. So if we want our political parties to have ideologies, the first condition is to have some sort of negative social or economic pressure for them to react to. Going back to the years before independence, the negative pressure we had at that time was the increasing levels of taxation by the British.
Now, in order for negative pressure to transform into political ideologies, that pressure has to be experienced equally amongst a large group of people. It's not enough to just have negative pressure. everyone must feel the pain of that pressure. The rich, the poor, the young, the old, everyone must feel the pain. In the years leading up to independence, once we all felt the pain of British taxation, everyone started to focus their attention and resources on one ideology: nationalism.
So associations started to form at all levels of our society with that one goal in mind. We formed institutional memory and even a common language around nationalism. And political parties at that time became a means for us to achieve the specific social goal of nationalism.
Lagos Racecourse is the scene, and it's the afternoon of Nigeria's great day, with thousands awaiting the climax and resolved to relish every minute leading up to it. Princess Alexandra.
In 1960, we became independent in large part because of the work that political parties did to push that ideology.
But political ideologies haven't really worked out so well for us since 1960. Since 1960, our political ideologies have tended to align along tribal or religious lines. Every major crisis that has happened in this country since 1960 has absolutely been driven by the political ideology of tribalism.
So while having political parties with clear and distinct ideologies would solve the problem of party defection, the question is, can we trust ourselves and our politicians to form meaningful ideologies that go beyond tribe and religion?
If the reality of our political life at this point in our development is that we still cannot see beyond tribe and religion, then political defections might actually be a good thing for us.
Because if we tell them that they cannot defect, then they will end up uniting along tribal and religious lines, and that's not good for us. At least in this way, when they choose to defect, they are simply going to wherever they can get the opportunity for power without giving any consideration to tribe or religion. And isn't that the Nigeria we want?
The Nigeria we want is the one where political parties can form ideologies beyond tribe and religion. And I think that party defections is part of that process. So if we prematurely stop party defections by force, we may actually be getting further and further away from the ideal state. We need to let party defections continue to happen, but if the defections become too disruptive to the government agenda, then we may need to start adding some guardrails around defections so that we can regulate them a bit more. Maybe we can create a transfer window, a period of time during which defections are allowed. Outside of that period of time, you can't defect. And then we can add fines for political parties who violate that transfer window. As Nigerian voters become more and more educated and enlightened, they are going to help create the pressure politicians need to form clear and distinct ideologies around social and economic issues. And I actually see a glimmer of that starting to form around APC. APC's ideology seems to be about wealth distribution, making sure that wealth is spread equally and especially to the rural areas. To that end, they've been focused on curbing corruption to ensure that the wealth we have remains in the country. And they've been investing in agriculture and social services to reach the poorest parts of our population. But the thing about wealth is that in order to spread it around, you have to have it in the first place. Someone has to create wealth. And that's really not APC's strong suit. So there's an opportunity for some other party to come up and drive the ideology of wealth creation. This party could then spend its tenure focusing on enabling private sector expansion and gaining market access for made-in-Nigeria products. Then after their tenure is over, the wealth distribution party can come back into power and help balance the equation again between the rich and poor. If we can establish these two ideologies in two separate parties, wealth distribution on the one hand and wealth creation on the other, I think we'll be in good shape. But it's really important that these two ideologies are embodied in two separate political parties. It's the tension between wealth creation and wealth distribution that will create the perfect balance. And you can't have that tension if one party insists on doing it all. The Backstory is a Triple E Media production. Production copyright 2022 Triple E Media Productions. If you enjoyed this episode of The Backstory and you would like to hear more, go to our website at 234audio.com to play the sample content. Then download our app from the Google Play Store for even more episodes. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel at 234audio to watch the video for this episode. Make sure to click the notification bell, like, and leave a comment. Our episodes can also be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. This episode of The Backstory was produced by Rahmat Muhammad, Anthonieta Kalunta, Dominic Tabakaji, and Sam Tabakaji. Executive producer Rahmat Muhammad. Special thanks to Mala Iwa Gbado Ikaleku.